Hi everybody, Dr. Joe Dispenza here. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to your lives in some way in this Flow Summit. I want to give you some ideas and some thoughts to contemplate that may be instrumental to apply to your lives. And now this is not the truth, this is my truth. And these are the things that we've studied through our research and through my own personal experience seems to have a profound effect on the nature of reality. I'm going to make some assumptions since you're all here and you are registered for this event. And some of the assumptions are based on a quantum model of reality that says our thoughts have something to do with our destiny. And in order for us to demystify the process of flow, let's talk about all the elements that keep us out of that present moment where things line up, where it's effortless, it's easy, things are coming to us, there's no effort, we're not forcing outcomes, we're not controlling outcomes, we're not over-focused or obsessing in the ways that people live their daily lives. And what is the process that gets us to that moment, and what are the things that keep us from experiencing it? So if you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, and 90% of your thoughts, consciously or unconsciously, are the same thoughts as you think the day before, if you're thinking the same way, then it makes sense that your life will be the same way. Now, let's break it down into two elements. First element, from the quantum perspective, every thought that you think not only produces a chemical that signals your body to feel certain ways, but that thought also produces a frequency, and that frequency carries information. And the more orderly, the more coherent, the more refined the thought is in the present moment, the greater its ability to carry a message or information. Remember that. But from a pure classical physics standpoint, in the sense that we live in three-dimensional reality, by you thinking the same thoughts, it's going to lead you to make the same choices. If you keep making the same choices, you keep re-experiencing the same behaviors. Those behaviors ultimately turn into a habit. And a habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors that lead to emotions that we do so many times that we no longer have to consciously think about it. In other words, a habit is when you've done something repeatedly and your body now knows how to do it better than your conscious mind. And in a sense, it becomes subconscious or unconscious. And that behavior automatically leads to the same experience. And the same experience that we have in our lives is filtered through our senses. And as we experience something, whatever it is, if we've experienced it before, the same chemical feedback through what we're tasting, what we're seeing, what we're smelling, what we're feeling, what we're hearing is rushing back to the brain, and it's signaling circuits in your brain to either reorganize into new patterns, if it's a new experience, or fire the same patterns in the same way that continuously stamp the same circuits in the same patterns. And that principle of firing and wiring begins to hardwire the brain to look for the same experience. And what does the experience produce? The payoff, the emotion. So the same behavior leading to the same experience, producing the same feeling or emotion then, causes the body to get the same information. And as long as we're living by the same feelings, we tend to cause those feelings tend to cause us to think in very familiar ways. And the cycle goes on. Now the problem is, everything in your life stays the same. So then, most people then, by firing and wiring the same thoughts, by making the same choices, by demonstrating the same behaviors, by repeating the same experiences and living by the same feelings and emotions, they're headed for a very specific, predictable future. And so what they don't realize in those unconscious states, that they forget that they create reality. So let's just say that the pattern of doing this is something that you do every single day, and you've been doing it for the last 15 years. Well, your body, in a certain amount of time, will be programmed into certain behaviors. It'll be on autopilot, making the same choices. And your body, which has been conditioned to be the mind now, is dragging you into the same future based on what you did in the past. And we lose our free will to create to a series of programs. So now the body is in a predictable future. So the opportunity for an unknown new experience, a flow moment, can't take place because the body is preoccupied by anticipating the next known experience. No room for the flow, no room for the unknown. And many people will wake up in the morning, and if you understand that your brain is a record of the past, a memory bank of everything you've learned and experienced to this moment, and you wake up in the morning and you start thinking about your problems, and those problems are memories that are etched in the brain that are connected to certain people, certain objects, certain things at certain times and places. If you wake up in the morning and you search for your pain in your body, or you look for the feeling of fatigue, for the most part then we begin to think in the past. And because every one of those problems has an emotion associated with it, because we've experienced it, the moment we feel unhappy, the moment we feel suffering, the moment we feel guilt, the moment we feel fear, now our body's in the past, because thoughts are the language of the brain and feelings are the language of the body. And the process of thinking and feeling in the same ways, the thought and the feeling, the memory and the emotion, the stimulus and response, is conditioning the body subconsciously to be in the past. And it makes sense then that the moment you feel unhappy, or the moment you feel fear, or the moment you feel guilt, those emotions are going to influence the thoughts that are consistent with it, which are going to fire and wire the same circuits, signal the limbic brain to produce certain chemicals that are released through the pituitary that signal hormonal centers, and you feel the same way. And this cycle of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking becomes a person's state of being. So it makes sense then that many people start their day with their entire state of being in the past. And the body is so objective that it doesn't know the difference between the real-life experience that's producing that feeling or that emotion and the emotion that that person is experiencing by thought alone. When the person freezes an image in their mind and their brain to remember a past memory, if they're truly in the present moment, their brain is believing it's living in that past reality. So the process of doing this over and over again conditions the body to subconsciously live in the past. And now, in that state of being, that familiar past, we're always anticipating the predictable future. So the familiar past tends to be the known. And living by that same state doesn't allow the unknown to exist. By the same means, living in the predictable future is also the known. The only place then that makes sense where the unknown exists is the sweet spot of that eternal present moment. And one of the aspects of flow, one of the aspects where things are lining up and it seems like the universe is working in our favor, is when we're truly in the present moment. And our research shows then that it's a skill, that the more you practice it, the better you get at it. And one of the significant reasons that we meditate in our work is to teach people to catch themselves in their thoughts and their emotions and their propensities of certain behaviors and habits, to catch themselves in their meditation when they start thinking about something in their future that's known and familiar. How long is the music going to go? What do I have to do when I finish my meditation? I'd love a cup of coffee. And when they catch themselves investing their attention and their energy into a known, predictable future, and instead of giving up on themselves and giving up on their meditation and say, I'm not good at meditating, they catch themselves and they bring their attention back to the present moment. Now, that is a victory because you are executing a will that is greater than those programs. By the same means, if you feel emotional and those emotions then cause you to remember certain experiences in the past, or certain experiences in the past cause you to feel certain emotions, the moment we catch ourselves feeling irritated or agitated or impatient or frustrated or anxious, instead of quitting in the meditation, having the ability to settle the body back down into the present moment and lower the volume to that emotional state is telling the body it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind. And that's a victory as well. And in both examples, we find that when a person is doing this properly and they settle the body back into the present moment, there is a liberation of energy. And the body is consistent with the animal in us. And teaching the body to be in the present moment is a training. So what's the relevance of that? Well, if you keep practicing this every day, taking your attention out of the familiar past and the predictable future, lowering the volume of certain emotions, overcoming the anticipation of the next moment. It seems tedious in the beginning, but the training leads you to be more present in your life. And being in the present moment allows you to access information or possibilities. That's when we're no longer living in the known. So practicing being in the present moment during your meditations and knowing the difference between when you're there and when you're not has a significant contribution to that flow moment. And people who experience that flow will tell you as if time stood still for me. Everything slowed down and I felt like I had an enormous amount of time to do whatever I wanted to do. Now that kind of focus, where time is elongated, is causing the person to move closer and closer to source, and it's raising their energy. Why? Because Einstein said, time and space are not conditions in which we live, but modes in which we think. And so having the ability to be present, if where you place your attention is where you place your energy and you are truly in the present moment, there's a lot of energy in the present moment for possibility, for the unknown. So that's one important element. By the same means, by thinking certain thoughts that are known and are connected to the past, and that thought produces a frequency in the quantum, the thought of your past is producing a very similar frequency. And if thoughts and feelings have some effect on our lives, as long as we're thinking and feeling in the same way from a quantum perspective, your energy tends to be the same. Why? Because thoughts tend to be a directive. They tend to have an electrical signal in the field. Feelings tend to be more magnetic. They tend to produce a carrier wave for that intention. And so if people are thinking and feeling certain ways every single day in their life, they're sending the same signal into the field. Whether it's good or bad, right or wrong, whether they're suffering because of some past event, they're sending that signal out to recreate the same reality. And there is no flow in that state. Now, what else interferes with our ability to be in that flow experience? And I think that the biggest element has to do with our response to conditions in our environment. Now, the stronger the emotions that you feel to certain problems, to certain people in your life, causes you to pay attention to whatever it is that's causing it. So then, the stronger the emotion you have to an enemy, to a global situation, to a coworker, the more you give them your attention. And if where you place your attention is where you place your energy, you're giving away your life force, your very power to change, to create something new because of that person or that circumstance. Our research shows that when you're sitting in a meditation and your body moves into an aroused state and signals those hormones of stress, those emotions that tend to cause us to feel more like density, more like matter and less like energy, more like the particle and less like wave. Those emotions then, when we feel those feelings, if a person has the ability to lower the volume to that emotion in their meditation and keep practicing overcoming that emotional state, there'll come a moment where the body finally is trained to a new mind and they settle in the present moment and they take their attention off that person, off that problem, off that circumstance, in their outer world, and they're calling energy back to them. They're taking their power back. And our research shows then, if done properly, they begin to build their own electromagnetic field. Now they have energy to heal. Now they have energy to create. Now there's energy for that flow moment. And once again, if the body has been conditioned to be the mind, and the moment a person starts feeling that emotion, they think that they don't have control over that emotional state, and they automatically are influenced in their behaviors and their thoughts equal to that emotion. Having the sensibility or the willingness to be able to work with that emotion produces this normal change in the way we view the past or we view our problems. In other words, we're no longer looking at those problems through the hardwired patterns in the brain and the emotions of the past. So then, if your brain is a record of the past, and you have an experience with a coworker that produces a lot of frustration, if you're lowering the volume to that emotion in your meditation, and you're no longer firing and wiring the circuits in your brain that are associated with the past experience of that person, in a sense then, you are changing in the present moment. Now here is the reality of that. We now know that it's going to take two elements for you to do this really well. One is energy, an energy that's greater than the frustration. And it takes awareness, it takes consciousness, it takes paying attention. And paying attention is being present. And it's a skill, as I said. So then, when you begin to stay conscious instead of going unconscious, and you muster up a certain amount of energy to relax the body into the present moment, once again, that becomes a victory because you are overcoming the body as the mind, and it liberates energy. And that's energy again for you to create with. So in time then, by doing this properly, the meditation then acts as an instrument for you in your waking day to respond less to your environment. So then, if to change is to be greater than your environment, and you are not starting your day reminding yourself of who you're going to be, and if 95% of who we are by the time we're in our middle-aged lives are a set of automatic responses, automatic behaviors, automatic thoughts and feelings, it makes sense then, if you're not cultivating a new mind before you start your day and reminding yourself of who you want to be. That's creating a new set of circuitry before the experience. If you're not rehearsing in your day mentally how you're going to be with that coworker and what new choices you'll make and new behaviors you'll demonstrate based on your experience of learning new ways to be, if you don't install those circuits and begin to install new hardware and repeat it enough times until it becomes a software program, then more than likely you'll behave in very predictable ways. And if you're not allowing your body to be taught a new way to feel before you enter that experience in that environmental condition, in other words, how am I going to be and how am I going to feel when I'm in the presence of some limited experience in my life? Can I teach my body emotionally what that future will feel like before I get to that experience? And if I can live in this emotional state, independent of the condition in my environment, that emotion will begin to influence different thoughts and different behaviors. And so most people then will say, no, I'll wait for the condition or the person to change in order for me to feel joy again or for me to feel a love for life. And in a sense, they're waiting for their outer world to change their inner world, the way they feel. That is classical physics at its height of cause and effect. But if we can trade that frustration, that limited emotion, and no longer think those thoughts that are associated with those feelings, the inhibition of the thought and the feeling and the stimulus and response begins to break the subconscious program. The side effect of this is discomfort. The side effect of this is stepping from known familiar territory, knowing your environment, knowing how you feel, knowing how you think, into the unknown. And if the body's been conditioned to be the mind, if we're not trading that feeling of frustration for an elevated emotion and thinking about how we're going to be in that future, rehearsing it mentally, installing the circuits in the brain to look like you've already done it, and combining those thoughts with the feeling of what it would be like. The joy, the freedom, the love, the heart-centered elevated emotion, the thought and the feeling, the stimulus and response begins to condition our body into a new future. And if the body is conditioned enough times, then when we open our eyes and we return back to the environment, our response to the environment is no longer predictable, and we are outside the known, and the flow experience happens in the unknown. So our research shows that when people do this properly, their brain and body begin to change ahead of the environment. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, it's the environment that signals the gene. That's a fact. And the end product of an experience in the environment is an emotion. So in a sense, a person is signaling their genes ahead of the environment. They're changing their body and beginning to wear or instruct and select new genes so that they become the very person that they want to be. Because genes make proteins, and proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body. They are messengers, codes of information that have assignments. And the expression of proteins then becomes the expression of life. And this is how people heal. Because they just don't do their meditations, and when they finish their meditation, they return back to the old self, responding to their environment the same way. Their familiar response to the environment and the emotions associated with it stops signaling the genes for health and upregulating the genes for repair, and now they're back to downregulating the genes for disease, because 45 minutes of meditation and changing their state can't compete with 15 hours in one day of reacting in a similar way. So then, we also know that when people learn how to trade those limited emotions for elevated emotions, heart-centered emotions, that it strengthens their immune system. Strengthens their immune system by releasing certain proteins that cause them to be immune to their environment. In other words, when the person says, I'm not upset because of that person, because of the news, because of global situation, because of politics, and they're no longer saying that their environment is controlling the way they feel and think. And if they're thinking and feeling equal to their environment, if you said that you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, then our thinking and feeling in the same way equal to our environment reaffirms and recreates the same environment, and we as quantum observers frame it in that exact same way. So when the person no longer is responding to their coworker in frustration, and they're no longer saying it's that person or that circumstance that's making me feel and think this way, their response to their environment is no longer weakening the living organism. They're less victimized to the circumstances in their life. That means then they're less victimized to anything in their environment. And if they trade those limited emotions for an elevated emotion, and they can open their hearts and practice doing it, our research shows it's a skill. And the more you practice it, the better you get at it. So then opening our eyes and navigating in three-dimensional reality and no longer being seduced by the conditions in our environment through our senses to cause us to no longer see possibility is that elegant moment now where we step outside the known and we are now able to begin to look for possibilities that we haven't seen before. Doing this with your eyes open is essential because meditation isn't about pleasing God or doing the right thing or cultivating a state to be spiritual. It's priming the brain and body. All of those things are true. But it really is priming the brain and body so that when you open your eyes, you're greater than your environment. When you're sitting in the fire of those emotions and those unconscious habits and programs, those hardwired attitudes, and you're settling the brain and body back into the present moment, you are overcoming your body. And that action, that repetition, causes you to respond differently in your life. And if you're not thinking about the predictable future and the familiar past, and you've been working on the present moment every single day, you'll be more present in your life and you won't be thinking about what's going to happen next. That kind of anticipation stops that flow experience. So then, many times, people's responses to their environment signal the primitive nervous system called the fight or flight nervous system. And now we are tapping all of our body's resources for some threat or danger in the outer environment based on our perception, based on our view of whether it's going to cause us to no longer be able to predict what's going to happen next, to have the feeling that we're losing control, having the perception that this could get worse. And we signal that branch of the autonomic nervous system, and we tap all of the body's energy and resources to prepare it for some threat in the environment. Short term, no problem. The body can rest and repair. It can eat and restore itself when the stress is over, when the event is over. But if you keep responding to your coworker in the same way, and you keep squandering that energy and mismanaging your attention and energy, in time, living in emergency mode for an extended period of time, there won't be much energy to create with. There won't be much energy for that flow experience. And in a sense, we're using all of the body's resources. It's emitting light and information. Every cell is summating with the next cell, to begin to produce energy, light, frequency, and that frequency carries information. By signaling the body in its stress response, we start drawing from those resources, and our energy, our field begins to shrink. So then we feel more matter, more density, and less energy, less frequency. We're more particle and less wave. And the senses are heightened during the stress response, and we become more of a materialist. And we narrow our focus on the danger, on the material world. So then, if where you place your attention is where you place your energy, and people are living in this stress response, and all their attention is on their environment because that's where the danger is. It's all on the material world. Their senses are heightened. Their body's getting an arousal of chemistry. They feel more like their body, and they're trying to predict the future based on the past. Now, if all of their attention is on their body, on their environment and time, now they have to play by the rules of classical physics, which says that everything that they create in their life is going to take a certain amount of time. And the lack of having the event, waiting for the event to change, to feel the emotion of relief, feel the emotion of joy, when it finally happens, they forget that how they think and feel creates reality, and they keep their creations at an arm's length. So the impatience of doing everything they can to make that feeling go away causes them to become more dependent on the environment, whether it's a shopping spree, whether it's a drug, whether it is a football game, anything that's going to make the feeling go away. So then, when we're living in this state of separation and lack, we force outcomes, we fight for outcomes, we control outcomes. We do everything we can because in a sense, we are matter trying to change matter in primarily an unconscious state. And so we rush, we compete, we manipulate, lie, we cheat, we do anything we can, matter to matter, to make that feeling go away. And we forget then that we are the creator. That state is not inviting to the flow moment. In fact, it has nothing to do with flow. So then what happens to the brain in this state? If the person can think about the coworker and produce the feeling of frustration by thought alone, then they're turning on that stress response literally by thought alone. And so then by living by those stress responses long term, and they shift their attention in the aroused state of stress and trying to control and predict everything in their life, Their attention goes to someone, to something, somewhere, and sometime. They're trying to predict the future based on their past. They're texting and calling and tweeting and writing emails and Facebooking and posting. They're in that aroused state. As they shift their attention to all of these elements, every single thing that's known in their brain, in their environment, connected to their body, and anticipation of the future or the past, is mapped neurologically in their brain. So as they shift their attention in this aroused state to all of these different elements in their environment, the brain starts to fire out of order. It starts to produce very incoherent signals in the field. And in a sense, we lose our connection. We lose our connection to that field. We have a very poor signal for the brain. By the same means, when a person is in that state of frustration, when they think about their coworker, or when they're around their coworker, or they're responding to whatever, it's like stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time. Their heart is aroused, it's beating very quickly, but they're not fighting, they're not running, and they're not hiding. And so the body is like stepping on the gas and the brake at the same time. The heart is pushing against vessels that are contracted, and it starts to beat out of rhythm. When that occurs, energy leaves the heart, as well as energy leaving the brain. And the heart then all of a sudden starts beating incoherently, and we lose our signal to the field. We're not in a state for that flow moment. So what we've learned for that flow moment to occur is a person has to get beyond their associations to their body, if their body's been conditioned to be their mind. They have to get beyond their memories and associations to certain people in their life that they identify with. They have to get beyond their association to everything in their life, every object in their life. They have to disinvest their attention and energy out of this three-dimensional reality where all their attention has been, on the known, and put it on the unknown. They have to stop thinking about where they sit, where they work, where they sleep, where they need to go, where they're sitting during their meditation. They have to go from somewhere to nowhere. And they have to transcend that predictable future and the familiar past and relax into the sweet spot of that eternal present moment. And when people go from a narrow focus to a broad focus, the act of sensing energy, frequency, that unifying field, begins to cause the brain to become more orderly, become more synchronized, to become more whole and unified. And our research shows when this happens, the brain gets highly coherent, very coherent. When the brain is coherent, we're more coherent, and it can now send a very clear signal into the field. By the same means, when a person is practicing opening their heart and they're learning how to self-regulate and elevate their emotional state, if they do this properly and the heart starts moving back into rhythm and order as well, now they're beginning to emit a magnetic field that begins to be emitted or released out into the field around them. Now they have a Wi-Fi signal. They have a strong signal. And when the heart is coherent and it's beating in order, it's like dropping a pebble after pebble after pebble in the water in a very rhythmic pattern. And it begins to produce a strong signal, a ripple effect into the field. And that's energy that we create with. And the heart is the creative center. It's the union of opposites, of polarities. It's the yin and the yang, it's wholeness, it's oneness. And this is our connection to the field. This is where we start feeling more whole. This is where we start feeling more like our future has already happened. So when the heart is orderly and it's sending a signal out, it can carry the thought, a harmonic of that frequency into the field. And doing this properly, combining that clear intention with a coherent brain, with an elevated emotion and a coherent heart, we begin to produce a strong signal. We synchronize our energy to a possibility in our life. And being able to sustain that state with your eyes open in your waking day and practicing, staying in that energy, staying in that frequency, staying in this elevated state, independent of the cravings of the body, independent of the habits of the body, independent of the emotional conditioning of the body, independent of the conditions in our environment. No person, no circumstance, no thing would move us from this energy. and relaxing into the present moment and no longer thinking about the future or the past, and being truly awake and aware. When the energy is synchronized, the side effect of that is flow. And what do I mean by that? Not only are you extending or elongating time where you feel like you have all the time in the world to do whatever it is that you need to do, you're out of the stress response. But now, when we are connected to energy and information, the flow experience means then we no longer have to force or control outcomes and make them happen as matter trying to change matter. In a sense, we are connected to a greater frequency. We're connected to the field, the unified field, that invisible field of information that connects everything physical and material. And it exists. And most people have no experience of it because they take no time to bring it to life with their awareness, to pay attention to it, to notice it, to feel it, to experience it, to stay aware of it, to stay present with it, to become more of it and less of them. This act of practicing doing this over and over again causes the brain to not only get orderly and synchronized, but it also allows a person then to emit a very persistent field. So doing it with their eyes open and being able to synchronize their energy while they're living their day, when there's a vibrational match between their energy and some potential in the quantum field that they are creating, some dream, some vision, some practice, when there's that kind of synchronization between a person's energy and some event that they'd like to create in their life, they no longer have to force or control outcomes and go get it. If they're connected to source, if they're connected to a greater frequency, and that's connected to everything physical and material, now all of a sudden they start to draw experiences to them. Now they're all of a sudden noticing those synchronicities, those coincidences, those opportunities that are coming to them because there's a change in energy. And nobody changes until they change their energy. And when we change our energy, then we begin to change our lives. Now, when does the flow experience disappear? Let's say that you're synchronizing your energy and you have synchronicities happening in your life, and every synchronicity, the surprise of it, causes you to feel more of that elevated emotion, and it causes you to create even more. And then as you take that emotion and you feel even more of it from the synchronicity, the opportunity, it's very easy to hold the vision of your mind. The stronger the emotion you feel in that future, the more you pay attention to that picture in your mind, and you're remembering your future in a sense. You're branding it in there neurologically. And thinking within the circuits of that future as a reality, feeling the emotions of it is no longer difficult. It's your state of being. So then the person who does this properly, who uses the synchronicity for the next experience, begins to notice that more of it happens, the magic continues. But the moment they respond to their coworker again, and they trade that feeling of their future with some emotion that is predictable, known, familiar from the past, they just disconnected from the energy of their future, and they're back to the energy of the past, and the flow moment disappears. They're back to the same. Now, they didn't fail. We all do this. I do it numerous times. Having the ability then to excuse ourselves in the moment and remember that energy of our future and self-regulate, create that kind of brain and heart coherence again, and recalibrate, self-regulate, make the choice to shorten our emotional responses to the environment. It's not that we react. The question is, how long are you going to react? Because living in those same thoughts and feelings then causes you to diminish the flow experience. But by getting back into it, excusing yourself and reconnecting to the energy of your future, something amazing happens. It may take a day or two, or you may have to practice your meditation and get back into it and review or rehearse how you're going to be if a circumstance or situation happens to evolve your experience. If we live in these elevated emotions of our future with our eyes open, we no longer have to look for it any longer. We only look for it when we're separate from it. We only look for it when we are back to feeling separate from the experience, feeling some other emotion of lack. When we feel the emotions of our future, There's no reason to look for it because the body's believing it's already happened. Now, what's the significance of that? If you're feeling the emotions of your future and you're no longer looking for it, then it makes sense then that all of a sudden you start to believe in it more. And this is important because our belief in our future then becomes greater than our belief in our past. And being able to self-regulate, being able to excuse ourselves and not say it's that person or that circumstance that's making me feel or think this way, to get back into the energy of our future means then that we are connected to our future. Practicing doing this as an experiment, a flow experiment in our lives, is essential then for us to begin to experience a greater aspect of ourselves, the unknown self, the creators that live within us. So the act of practicing the flow moment, the act of cultivating a new mind and a new body, in the beginning takes quite a bit of work. But if we do this properly and we practice it enough times, and we're able to sustain this state with our eyes open in our daily lives, that moment of flow where we're no longer forcing or controlling and things are coming to us causes us to believe now that we are more of the creator of our lives instead of the victim of our lives. And the practice of this is a skill, and the more we practice it, the better we get at it. Thank you so much.